In the first part of this video, my classmate Jaymie told you of how a girl went missing and suddenly reappeared in school after 2 months, puzzling everyone. I was that girl. I was the girl who disappeared. You can call me Casmer, and I'm going to share with you the story about how I got kidnapped and escaped. Before we continue, support this video by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Stay updated by turning on that little notification bell. I had a happy childhood. I went to school and had friends in my own country. One day, a rich businessman, Mr. Aswad, visited our school. He saw me and fancied an interest in me. The next day, he was in our house and asked for my hand in marriage. He offered my family a huge sum of money. I was horrified. I was only 12 years old and he was in his 30s and already had 3 wives. I never wanted to be a child bride. My parents refused, thankfully. They told Mr. Aswad that I was too young to be married and that I hadn't experienced enough of the joys of childhood yet, and that they planned to send me to college so I can live an independent life. But Mr. Aswad was insistent. He used his money and influence to make my dad lose his job and made it difficult for our family. When my parents still refused him, he attempted to take me by force. That was when my family decided to leave our country. Without enough money, it was extremely difficult for us. But thankfully, my father's friend stowed us away on his cargo ship and we headed for the States. We settled in a small town. There, we were able to live peacefully, but not without the fear of being discovered by the authorities. You see, we were undocumented immigrants, and my parents constantly feared the day that we'd be discovered and deported back to our country. We also feared that Mr. Aswad might find out where I was, so I always wore a hijab to cover my face. On the positive side, I was able to go back to school. I was happy to learn new things and experience a whole new culture. I was bullied by some of my classmates, but it wasn't as bad as the idea of marrying at such a young age, so I endured the teasing. Even when I was called Vampire Girl, I just let it roll off my shoulders. One afternoon, as I was walking home from school, a van pulled over right in front of me. The van's door slid open and masked men with guns pulled me in before I could even shout, "Help!" They tied and gagged me and covered my eyes. I felt a gun pointing to my ribs. One of the men told me to stop resisting or I would be shot. Then a mobile phone rang and one of my captors answered it.
"Yes, sir. We got her. Don't worry. We'll take care of your new wife,"
I heard him say. My heart sank at that moment. My worst fear had come true. Mr. Aswad had found us, and now he was having me kidnapped. I was so scared. I was going to be brought back to my country without even saying goodbye to my parents. They were surely worried about me. I felt so weak and helpless. What would happen to me now? We drove for what felt like hours, and when the van finally stopped, the men dragged me into a small, dark room. They removed my blindfold, and I crouched in fear in the corner of that room. I didn't know where I was. I must have been miles away from my parents. I lost count of how many days I was in that room. The door only opened when I was given meals. I tried to figure out where I was, but I really had no idea. It was quiet most of the time, but I did notice the sound of a faint bell that rang at a certain time twice a day. After a while, I realized that it sounded like my school bell. A little glimmer of hope sparked within me. If I was near the school, maybe I could run back to my house. This is how I created my plan. The next time a meal was delivered, I bit the guy in the arm, kicked him in the crotch, and he fell on the ground in pain. Thankfully, there was no one else on guard. It seems like they underestimated a kid like me. I searched for the nearest exit. When I got out of that room, I found myself in my school's hallway. I realized I was just kept in the school's basement. No wonder I heard the school bell. I heard my captor shouting and running from behind me, so I rushed to my classroom and hid. I saw a cabinet in the distance that looked like it could just fit me with the door shut, so I crept in and closed it. I covered my mouth and kept myself as quiet as possible as I heard my kidnappers desperately shouting for me. Then I fell asleep. When I woke up, my classmates were all looking at me as I was crouched inside this small cabinet. They all looked at me like I was a ghost. My teacher immediately called the cops and the case was investigated. I had to be placed under the witness protection program. Later on, I found out that the school's night guard was one of the kidnappers, but they never got evidence of Mr. Aswad's involvement. Thankfully, UNICEF helped me and my parents settle in the States, and for the meantime, we'll be safe from Mr. Aswad. At least, I hope so. What do you think about my story? Leave your comments below. Did you enjoy this video? If so, share it with your friends and help us get to 1,000 likes. And don't forget to check out our other nutty stories.